Okay. Hello, and welcome to this issue of Discovering Truth at the Movies. My name is David Lance. In this episode of the Chronicles of Belteshazzar, Nebuchadnezzar takes his Jewish captives to Babylon. Now, among the exiles is a teenager by the name of Daniel. And so while Daniel is preparing to leave his home, he finds a gift from his father and realizes that his dad loves him. Now, one of the other things that I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be sharing a little bit from the movie Gladiator. And using the movie Gladiator, I'm going to ask this question: what kind of relationship are we building with our children? I just want to mention that the Chronicles of Belteshazzar is a book that I am writing, designed for kids roughly in ages 9 through 15, fourth through ninth grade. It's sort of built on the Princess Bride video from 30 years ago, where a grandfather is reading a story to his grandson who is sick at home, and the boy gets caught up in the storyline. And so where we're at in the Chronicles of Belteshazzar is that we've transported four grandsons back to the time of the prophet Daniel and experiencing what the prophet Daniel experienced. And so I want to ask you to consider joining me when I read a chapter for each episode. And so I'll be including a question for reflection at the end of each episode. And also I'll post these episodes on my podcast, Discovering Truth at the Movies. I'm also putting together a playlist on my YouTube channel, which I'll provide information on. So be sure to check that out, and also sign up to get more information on the sign up link there. So I hope to eventually publish this as a book. And so without further ado, let me begin by reading the Chronicles of Belteshazzar. Naaman's command formed lines of 5 rows deep. Between the two lines, palm branches had been laid. King Nebuchadnezzar and his escort rounded a bend in the road and emerged from the shadow of a hill, obstructing any view of the main army from the waiting corps. On cue, trumpets blew and men cheered the arrival of their king. Nebuchadnezzar and Naaman were accompanied by Shamgar, general of the Eastern Army. The 3 men went into Naaman's tent, where servants immediately brought wine and food. Nebuchadnezzar watched his 2 military advisors, as neither man really liked each other. Nebuchadnezzar's father had taught him that it was best to have men who distrusted one another as advisors. In that way, one could always be sure to receive the pros and cons of a proposal, if for no other reason than each advisor would point out the flaws in the other man's arguments. It has been 3 days since the terms were delivered to the Hebrews, began Nebuchadnezzar. Have they given you an answer? Naaman smiled as he looked first at Nebuchadnezzar and then at Shamgar. He clapped his hands, and a servant entered. Bring me the list, he ordered. The servant disappeared into another chamber of the tent and emerged with a scroll and handed it to Naaman. The list was brought to us this morning, Naaman said as he unrolled the scroll and laid it on a table. Shamgar and Nebuchadnezzar looked over the list. The names were divided into groups describing their training and position in Hebrew society. When will they be ready to assemble for departure to Babylon? Asked Shamgar. Even as we speak, my men are gathering the exiles so that they will be ready to leave at dawn tomorrow. This is excellent, Naaman, Nebuchadnezzar said, a broad smile spreading across his face. My only concern, King Nebuchadnezzar, is that Jehoiakim will use this as an opportunity to deport his political rivals. We will have nothing but malcontents coming to Babylon. Naaman was still uncomfortable with the decision to bring these people to Babylon, and he felt it was his duty to at least cover his backside in case any negative consequences arose. Jehoiakim will use this as an opportunity to rid himself of his critics. It is true. However, this will add to our benefit, said Shamgar, seizing the opportunity to disparage his rival. These exiles will appreciate the opportunity to get out from under his rule. They will be eager to make a fresh start. We will groom them for positions of importance in Babylon. In time, they will come to be thankful for this day. Nebuchadnezzar watched Naaman bristle ever so slightly at Shamgar's words. He knew that Naaman was not happy with the prospect of foreign nationals on Babylonian soil. Nebuchadnezzar was sure, however, that that opinion would change in time. Here is what we must do then, said Nebuchadnezzar. We will send a messenger to order that the exiles be ready to leave at dawn along with the tribute. A battalion shall be sent to escort them back to Babylon. We shall then go to Ashkelon, where we will exact tribute and deportees there as well. From there, we will proceed to Tyre. With the Egyptians in disarray, I plan to send Shamgar down the coast, establishing outposts and filling our treasury. By this time next year, we will be ready to march against Egypt and crush her once and for all. That is my destiny, and I intend to fulfill it. With that, the meeting was adjourned. Nebuchadnezzar emerged from Naaman's tent and made his way to his own tent, which had been erected while the three of them met. Nebuchadnezzar wasn't sure which man was right about how the exiles would adapt to Babylon. He only knew that this had been his father's plan, and because of that, Nebuchadnezzar would carry it out. It would soon be dark, and he had much he needed to do in preparation for the meeting with Jehoiakim in the morning. As he traversed the remaining yards to his tent, his only wish was that he was as sure of himself as he pretended to be in front of his men. Daniel looked back at his parents for what he knew would be the last time. He could see his mother crying. Beside her, his father stood straight and tall, his face displaying no emotion. But to Daniel's surprise, his father had given him something of infinite value. Once again, he reassured himself that he had it on his person. He grasped the bulge in the knapsack which hung on his back. And once again, he felt the outline of two scrolls nestled within. One was his father's copy of the Torah, the 5 books of the law given word for word, some said even by letter, to Moses by Jehovah God. The document had been missing for over 100 years, hidden during the reign of the evil king Manasseh. Workers restoring a portion of the temple had found it only a few years before Daniel had been born. When King Josiah was yet a lad, his father had been one of the scribes assigned the task of recopying the Torah. So exacting were the requirements of making the copy, not one letter could be changed, that Daniel's father had only managed to make 2 copies. It was said that the Torah contained the secrets of the universe, but only those blessed by God would ever unlock its meaning. For the first time in years, Daniel realized that his father truly loved him. He walked on, his train of thought distracted by the sight of other exiles who, like himself, were no friends of King Jehoiakim. There were Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, 3 of Daniel's friends who had helped in the rescue of Jeremiah when Jehoiakim had sought to have the prophet killed. So this is how Jehoiakim would rid himself of those who opposed him. But not all were Jehoiakim's enemies. Shemaiah, a rival of Jeremiah, was also going, no doubt, to spy on Jehoiakim's foes in exile. As they marched, Daniel could see the king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, watching them leave. Beside him stood his right-hand man, Naaman, the captain of the guard. Daniel thought bitterly of the note that Ezekiel, who would be allowed to remain in Jerusalem, had slipped him. It had been written by Jeremiah, now in hiding. It said, "Upon your shoulders, God has placed the burden of his people. You are the key to returning them safely. Remember, things are not always as they may appear. You must be a father to Nebuchadnezzar. The Lord will provide a way for that to happen. May the Lord bless you and keep you." Words, just words. Ezekiel and Jeremiah weren't being forced to abandon their homes. Daniel cursed the day he had ever become involved with Jeremiah. Just then, Daniel saw flying above the head of Nebuchadnezzar a large bald eagle. He watched it high above and became mesmerized as he watched it circle, once, twice, 3 times. It circled 7 times and then flew east in the direction of Babylon. Daniel's thoughts were jerked back to the second scroll hidden in his pack, the scroll of Isaiah. Like the Torah, it too contained wisdom and prophecy. Daniel had committed much of it to memory already, but the single but the sight of the eagle, those words came rushing back to him now. Those who wait upon the Lord will renew their strength. They will rise up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. With those words, all the bitterness flowed out of him. Just as quickly, he felt an abiding peace. He thought of Jeremiah's message. Mere words? No. Daniel realized that they were much more than mere words. God did have some great purpose in store for him. Daniel set his mind to the task at hand and settled into a steady pace. It would be a long march. You know, let me take a drink of water if I may. Years ago, in doing the research for my novel, the Brotherhood of the Scroll, that the Chronicles of Belteshazzar is kind of an abridged version of. I learned that the same year that Nebuchadnezzar defeated Egypt at the Battle of Carchemish was the same year that Nabopolassar, Nebuchadnezzar's father, died. And so Nebuchadnezzar was unable to chase King Necho back to Egypt, but rather had to return to Babylon to bury his father and then be crowned king of the Babylonians. We also know that, based on history, that Nebuchadnezzar was about 25 years of age when he became king. Daniel was taken into exile when he was a teenager, and so probably not more than 10 years younger than Nebuchadnezzar. So they were close to the same age. In this chapter, I imagine that both Nebuchadnezzar and Daniel have father issues. Did they struggle with trying to live up to the expectations of their fathers? What was their relationship? Fear, friendship, love, or a distant, unemotional coexistence? While the book of Daniel tells us about his life in Babylon, we know nothing about his life in Jerusalem before he went into exile. Now, scholars believe that his family was part of the priestly class, and so for this portion of the story, I imagine Daniel's father as a stern, professor-like man. While we know little of how the Old Testament scrolls were taken from Jerusalem to Babylon, we do know that that in fact happened. And so in this chapter, I have Daniel thinking about how his father entrusted them to him, and this was his father's way of saying, I love you. I've thought about the issue of the father-child relationship over the years. When I was a young father, I was a member of what was called Toastmasters International, which was an organization devoted to helping people become better at speaking in front of groups. My first contest speech, because Toastmasters had lots of speech contests. My first speech contest I ever gave was titled "The Making of Straight Arrows." It's based on the 127th Psalm, which says that children are a blessing from the Lord. Like arrows in the quiver of a warrior, so are the children of one's youth. Happy is the man whose quiver is full of them. He will not be disappointed when he meets with his enemies in the gates. And so there's a movie that my wife and I really love, especially my wife. It's got Russell Crowe in it. It's called Gladiator. And there's a scene early in the movie where an aging Roman emperor, Marcus Aurelius, wishes to pass his throne to his trusted general, Maximus, played by Russell Crowe, instead of to his own corrupt son, Commodus. Upon hearing this, Commodus murders his father. In the movie, as he suffocates Marcus Aurelius, Commodus is crying and says at one point to his father, I would butcher the world for you if you would only love me. Now, obviously, Commodus was a mixed up guy, but he was seeking his father's love, his father's appreciation. And for whatever reason, that didn't happen. In fact, in the movie, Marcus Aurelius says that Commodus's failings is not Commodus's fault. It was his fault as being a bad father. And so, too late, Caesar realizes that his son Commodus's failings are really his own failings. And so, this brings me to an important idea that appears in the movie, and it is this. Because we're part of the body of Christ, what we do in life will echo in eternity. Now, I added the part about being a part of the body of Christ, but Russell Crowe as Maximus really does say to his soldiers, what we do in life will echo in eternity. And so, a question that I have for reflection is this: what kind of relationship are we building with our children? And how will that relationship echo in eternity? Well, I hope you've enjoyed this particular episode of the Chronicles of Belteshazzar, which is part of my Discovering Truth at the Movies podcast. If you sign up for my stuff, you can get my Conversations with the Culture, which is a monthly newsletter that I send out. And you can also get access to anthologies of past issues by going to my website at wisejargon.com/@the-movies. Well, thank you so much for hanging around for this uh, episode of the Chronicles of Belteshazzar, and I look forward to seeing you next time.